Welcome, dear listeners, to our scary stories. I'm your host, guiding you along the twisted trails of the macabre and the unexplainable. We venture together into the chilling depths of the human psyche, exploring the corners of our world where shadows hold sway. Tonight, we unlock the heavy doors of a mansion marred by a haunting legacy, where every mirror holds a terrifying tale. Buckle up and prepare to gaze into the chilling reflections of the Mansion of Mirrors. The winding road gave way to a sight that was both breathtaking and eerily beautiful. Through the veiling mist, the silhouette of the mansion emerged, massive and unyielding, against the backdrop of the gloomy sky. It stood secluded, atop a desolate hill like an indomitable beast of lore. Ambrose, a man of petite stature with curious hazel eyes, gazed up at it through the foggy windshield of his old, rickety van. His heart pulsed in his chest with a mix of anticipation and fear that gnawed at his composure. Crumbling stone facades and overgrown ivy met him as he parked near the mansion's front steps. He climbed out of the van, his worn leather boots crunching on the gravel pathway. The chill of the autumn wind nipped at his cheeks, and the scent of decayed leaves hung heavy in the damp air, amplifying the mansion's aura of abandonment. The sight would have sent an ordinary man scampering in the opposite direction, but Ambrose was not an ordinary man. His life revolved around forgotten artifacts and haunted estates, a profession that thrived on the whispers of history that lurked in dusty corners. Yet, this place, which he'd just inherited from a distant relative, was far more unsettling than anything he had encountered in his ventures. The grandeur of the mansion, masked by years of neglect, was a testament to a once vibrant past now lost in the echoes of time. As Ambrose fumbled with the rusted iron key, he could hear the distant hoot of an owl, a solitary serenade in the silent night. The massive door creaked open with a protest of its own, revealing a cavernous entrance hall, steeped in shadows that danced at the flicker of his flashlight. The mansion seemed to breathe around him. The musty scent of old wood, tinged with a sharp, metallic odor, made him shudder. But it was the cold that startled him. A chill, far beyond the autumn cold outside, seeped from the mansion's very bones, as if it held on to a winter that had never passed. Unfazed, Ambrose began his exploration, his flashlight revealing high ceilings and dust-shrouded furniture. He imagined the mansion in its prime, teeming with life, laughter resonating through its halls, and the clink of fine china painting pictures of grandiose soirees. But now, all that lingered were whispers of forgotten times. Exhaustion eventually claimed him, and he retreated to a room that seemed less decayed than the others. The bedroom was surprisingly cozy, with an antique four-poster bed still swathed in moth-eaten drapes. As he nestled into the musty bed linens, the mansion around him seemed to sigh, as though relieved at being inhabited again. A sense of foreboding filled the air, as if the mansion and its countless mirrors were impatient to reveal their secrets to him. As Ambrose closed his eyes, the distant hoot of the owl was replaced by the mournful whisper of the wind against the mansion's stone walls. His dreams, when they came, were filled with mirrored hallways and hushed voices, whispering tales of a time stained by violence, echoing the haunting history concealed within the mansion's silent heart. Dawn's light struggled to seep through the heavy velvet drapes that had not been parted in years. A feeble shaft of light managed to break free, illuminating a corner of the room where dust particles floated aimlessly in the still air. It was not the gentle chirping of birds or the familiar warmth of sunlight that roused Ambrose, but the strange sensation of being watched. His eyes fluttered open to the gloomy room, his heart pounding as he tried to shake off the unsettling feeling. Summoning his courage, Ambrose pushed the weathered drapes aside, allowing the morning light to seep into the room, forcing away the remnants of unease. The mansion looked somewhat less intimidating in the muted morning glow. The darkness of the previous night had receded, and he began to appreciate the Gothic beauty of the mansion, which seemed frozen in a bygone era. Emboldened by daylight, Ambrose ventured deeper into the mansion. As he wandered, his boots echoed against the marble floor, the noise bouncing around the empty halls like a lonely ghost. Then he found it, a grand hallway, its curved walls lined with ornate mirrors of different shapes, sizes, and styles. Each mirror was encased in an elaborate frame, some with gilded gold leaves, others with carved wooden creatures, their eyes seeming to follow him as he moved. The beauty of the mirrors was undeniable, but they were smothered in a thick blanket of dust and cobwebs, like a protective barrier hiding their true nature. Curiosity tugged at Ambrose as he approached one. Its large oval frame boasted intricate, serpentine patterns. The mirror was lifeless beneath the layers of grime, but as he wiped away the dirt, it began to gleam with renewed vigor. Ambrose could hardly believe what he saw in the reflection. Instead of his own image, he was greeted by a chaotic scene from a past long gone. A man, elegantly dressed, engaged in a brutal argument with a lady in Victorian attire. Their faces were twisted in anger and fear, but their words were trapped in the mirror, unable to reach him. The sight was so disturbing and surreal, Ambrose staggered back, his heart pounding against his ribcage. Yet, as he looked back, the mirror only reflected his pale, shocked face. Had he imagined the entire incident? The mansion seemed to grow colder, as though it were withholding its breath, waiting for his next move. Disturbed, yet intrigued, Ambrose moved to the next mirror. Its wooden frame bore carvings of cherubs and flowering vines. Again, he wiped away the dust, and as if replaying a horrific drama, the mirror showed another violent event from a different era. A woman's terrified screams rang silent in the reflection as an unseen menace pursued her. Ambrose recoiled from the mirror, his heart heavy with the horrors he'd glimpsed. The once grand hallway now felt like a crypt, each mirror a gravestone chronicling a brutal end. As the realization washed over him, the air seemed to tighten around him, and the mansion echoed with a chilling silence, punctuated only by his own shallow breaths. Each mirror was an eerie window into a violent past that the mansion refused to forget. What was he to make of this? He was caught in a chilling labyrinth of glass and silver, and there was no way out but to venture further into the abyss of the mansion's dark past. In the stark light of day, Ambrose found himself standing before the mirrors, grappling with the chilling spectacle he had encountered. These mirrors were not mere glass and silver, they were eerie chronicles of a history steeped in violence. Each mirror beckoned him with a haunting allure, pulling him further into the mansion's macabre mystery. Over the course of the day, he methodically cleaned each mirror, unable to resist the call of their horrific tales. Every polished surface reflected a different violent act, each more unsettling than the last. An opulent ballroom turned bloody battlefield, a serene library transformed into a silent theater of poison and betrayal, and a lady's boudoir made the stage for a gruesome crime of passion. The scenes painted a mosaic of maliciousness, the mansion's rich history marred by malice and violence. Yet, the silent screams and soundless cries that played out in the mirrors made his own world feel unnaturally quiet. These reflections bore down on Ambrose, their weight threatening to shatter his sanity. But as the sun sank behind a shroud of clouds, painting the mansion in a ghostly glow, a newfound determination sparked within him. He needed answers for his peace of mind and the untold spirits that seemed trapped in this hall of mirrors. Armed with a worn leather-bound journal and a stub of a pencil, Ambrose began documenting each scene, detailing the characters, their attire, the rooms, and the brutal acts he observed. His hand ached from the effort, but he pressed on, believing his observations would lead him to uncover the mansion's dreadful secrets. As he sketched and wrote, he realized that though the era and people changed, one figure seemed to be present in all scenes, lurking in the shadows. A man of ambiguous age, his face half hidden beneath a dark cloak, watching the macabre scenes with a gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. The silent observer, the possible perpetrator of these crimes. The day seeped away into night, leaving Ambrose alone in the hallway, surrounded by mirrors that hummed with a malignant energy. He could feel their gaze on him, their silent stories echoing in his mind. He felt a chill creep up his spine, not from the cold stone beneath him, but from the realization that these reflections knew him now. He was a part of their tale, and the mansion seemed to whisper its dark approval in the wind that whistled through the cracks and crevices. With a deep breath, Ambrose collected his notes, promising the reflections he'd return. He needed to discover the identity of the cloaked man and piece together the motive behind these violent acts. His journey into the mansion's past had only begun, and the mirrors awaited his return, ready to spill their stories and terrors into the life of their new listener. With dawn came a grim resolve. Ambrose left the mansion's eerie silence behind, venturing into the nearby town nestled in the valley below. The world outside the mansion was a stark contrast. The sun peeked out from the curtain of the morning mist, casting a warm glow on the cobblestone streets. People went about their morning chores, children laughed and played, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from the town bakery. Despite its charm, an undercurrent of apprehension ran through the town. Hushed conversations halted as Ambrose approached, and suspicious eyes followed him. It was as though the shadow of the mansion loomed over them, casting a gloom that the townsfolk could not escape. At the town's humble inn, Ambrose sought the oldest local, a frail yet fiery-eyed woman named Agnes. Nestled in her rocking chair by the fire, Agnes was a living archive of the town's history. Yet, when asked about the mansion, her wrinkles deepened into a frown, and her pale eyes turned hard. The mansion, she began reluctantly, is a place of sorrow. A legacy of a man too in love with his own reflection and his desire to control time. As she spun the tale, Agnes spoke of Oscar, the mansion's original owner, a wealthy man with an obsession for mirrors and a fascination for the macabre. He was a man feared by all, his name barely whispered for fear of inviting his wrath. His numerous wives had all met untimely, violent deaths, their screams forever echoing in the mansion's hallways. Yet, as horrific as the stories were, the townsfolk refused to speak of the mansion after Oscar's reign. Their lips sealed shut, their faces paled, and fear crept into their eyes. They'd glance at the hill, shudder, and look away as if the mansion could witness their betrayal. Ambrose left the town with more questions than answers. The foreboding edifice on the hill was not just a mansion, but a tomb of untold stories and unspeakable horrors. The townsfolk had distanced themselves from it, burying the dread and despair deep within their hearts. As he trudged back towards the mansion, the sun began to set, casting long shadows on the path. The mansion, bathed in the orange hue of the setting sun, seemed more sinister than ever. The town's silence and Agnes' tales lingered in his mind. He couldn't help but feel the mansion watching him return, its numerous mirrored eyes waiting to share more of its hidden horrors. A shiver coursed through him, not from the evening chill but the anticipation of the chilling tales that awaited him in the Hall of Mirrors. The mansion received Ambrose in its chilly embrace as he returned, its silence a stark contrast to the echoes of the town's tales that still rang in his ears. He could feel the anticipation in the air, the mirrors awaiting his touch to share their haunted past. Guided by his trusty flashlight, Ambrose set about exploring the mansion's labyrinthine corridors. Each room held its own story, whispered in the faded wallpapers, aged portraits, and dust-laden upholstery. His heart pounded in sync with the rhythm of the mansion's whispers, leading him deeper into the bowels of the age-old structure. In the mansion's vast library, amidst a forest of decaying books and brittle parchments, Ambrose found a leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with time. Etched on the cover in gold was the name that had sent chills through the town, Oscar. With a deep breath, he opened the diary. The scrawl within was erratic, a disturbing maze of thoughts and confessions. Oscar wrote of his obsession with mirrors, the thrill of watching life play out in them, and his ambition to manipulate their reflections. Each entry was a testament to Oscar's growing insanity, his detachment from reality, and his cruel fascination with violence. Reading between the lines of madness, Ambrose made a startling discovery. Oscar believed he could trap the souls of his victims in the mirrors, immortalizing their final moments of terror. He saw himself not as a murderer, but as an artist painting his masterpieces on a canvas of glass and silver. His victims were his muses, their deaths a performance to be captured and admired in his gallery of horrors. As Ambrose delved deeper into Oscar's demented psyche, he could almost hear the echoes of the madman's laughter in the library, the rustle of pages a ghastly accompaniment to his descent into madness. The diary was a window into Oscar's mind, its terrifying view bringing a chilling understanding to the horrific scenes replayed in the mirrors. The night grew darker as Ambrose continued reading, the candlelight flickering over Oscar's confessions. The reality of the mansion's history sent a wave of dread washing over him. It was a house of torment, its mirrors bearing silent testament to a madman's gruesome legacy. As Ambrose closed the diary, the mansion seemed to breathe around him. The library's aged books whispered their silent agreement, and the mirrors far away in the hall shimmered in anticipation. Armed with knowledge and a determination to end the cycle of violence, Ambrose knew he had taken his first real step into solving the macabre mystery of the Mansion of Mirrors. Days turned into nights as Ambrose pored over Oscar's diary, the madman's ramblings casting long shadows over his mind. His every waking moment was filled with images of Oscar's victims, their muted screams haunting him. Each line he read, each sketch he studied, only revealed more layers of the man's macabre fascination with mirrors and death. Through the twisted tales, Ambrose discovered a pattern. Oscar did not randomly select his victims. Each was carefully chosen, their fears exploited and manipulated. Oscar lured them into the mansion, trapped them in a world of mirrored illusions, and then delivered them to their tragic ends. His victims' final moments were not just preserved, they were glorified in the mirrors. Their terror, their despair, all distilled in glass and silver, a chilling collection that echoed Oscar's monstrous appetite for fear and domination. The house became heavier, more oppressive as Ambrose delved deeper into the diary. A cold wind seemed to howl through its vacant halls, and the mirrors shimmered with a dreadful anticipation. Their reflections pulsed with a sinister energy, eager to show more, to reveal the extent of Oscar's deeds. The mansion was no longer just a house. It was a witness, a participant, and an accomplice to Oscar's gruesome actions. It lived and breathed the horror enacted within its walls, the fear etched in its bones. As Ambrose paced the reflective hall, he felt the mansion watching him, the eyes of its past waiting to see his next move. A horrifying realization began to dawn on Ambrose. The mansion and its mirrors had a new tenant, and they expected him to play his part in their ghastly theater. Oscar may have penned the script, but the mirrors were the silent directors, waiting for the next performance. But Ambrose was not ready to bow to their expectations. Armed with the knowledge from the diary, he was determined to confront the mirrors, to challenge their reflective retribution. He wasn't a player in their morbid drama. He was the critic, ready to close the curtain on their show of horrors. With that thought, he closed Oscar's diary, the echoes of the madman's laughter fading into a silence that was more chilling than his words. The mansion clung to its secrets as tightly as it held onto its chill, even as the world outside bloomed with the vibrant colors of an approaching spring. As days bled into nights, Ambrose found himself spiraling deeper into the mansion's morbid history. The grand hall of mirrors was no longer just a room in the mansion. It had become a nightmarish landscape where time and reality blurred. The mirrors whispered incessantly, spinning tales of terror, their reflections undulating with each unveiled secret. His dreams, when they came, were an extension of his waking hours. The mirrors seeped into his subconscious, their scenes playing out against the backdrop of his mind. Each dream left him waking in a cold sweat, the cries of Oscar's victims ringing in his ears. The grandeur of the mansion seemed to fade, its elaborate decorations and antique furniture now shrouded in an ominous aura. The carved wooden creatures stared down from their frames, their eyes following him with an almost malignant intent. The once intricate patterns on the wallpaper now seemed to twist and turn into monstrous forms in the dim light. Even his own reflection seemed alien to him. The man staring back from the mirror was gaunt, with hollow eyes and an intensity that scared him. He was becoming a part of the mansion, his essence intertwining with its centuries-old history. With each passing day, his world shrank, confined to the Hall of Mirrors and Oscar's haunting diary. He ate sparingly, slept even less, and found himself constantly on edge. The line between the mansion's past and his present was blurring, Oscar's insanity nibbling at his sanity. Yet, Ambrose refused to succumb to the mounting fear. He clung to the task at hand, his resolve hardening with every uncovered secret. He was not Oscar, and he would not let the mansion's echoes of violence dictate his fate. He found himself standing before the mirrors again and again, challenging their hold over him. With every unveiled secret, his determination to break the cycle of violence grew. The mansion might have claimed victims before, but he would not be one of them. As he stared into the depth of the mirrors, they seemed to ripple in response, their surface shimmering with a cold light. It was as if they recognized his defiance, their reflections pulsating with a silent threat. But Ambrose stood his ground, his gaze meeting theirs. He was ready for the battle, ready to sever the strings that had entrapped him in this macabre dance with the mansion of mirrors. The air in the mansion seemed to thicken as Ambrose prepared for his confrontation. The usual stillness of the mansion was broken by a nervous energy that whispered through the halls, as if the house itself held its breath in anticipation. Under the cold gaze of the mirrors, Ambrose stood in the center of the hall, the worn pages of Oscar's diary clenched in his hand. His heart pounded a rhythmic tattoo of defiance that echoed in the silence of the room. Drawing a deep breath, he addressed the mirrors, his voice resonating through the mansion. "Oscar," he called out, his voice firm despite the icy tendrils of fear coiling in his gut. I will not be another one of your victims, another scene in your sickening theater of horrors. A chill swept through the room, stirring up the dust that lay undisturbed for years. The mirrors shimmered as if disturbed by a breeze, their surfaces undulating, reflecting a whirlpool of tormented faces. Then they stilled, and a single reflection emerged from their depths. The man from the shadows, half hidden beneath a dark cloak, his eyes gleaming with a cruel satisfaction. Oscar. His apparition did not speak, it did not need to. His presence confirmed Ambrose's fears. The mansion, the mirrors, they were all tied to Oscar's spirit, eternally bound by his obsessions and sins. Ambrose stood his ground, staring back at Oscar's reflection. I am not like you, Oscar, he said, his voice echoing through the hall. Your reign of terror ends here. I will not allow your legacy of violence to continue. A sinister laugh echoed through the mansion, Oscar's delight clear in the twisted curve of his lips. The mirrors vibrated with an unseen force, and the temperature dropped, turning the room into a winter's heart. The cruel truth rang through the mansion. Oscar's spirit had not been vanquished. It was trapped, bound to the mansion, waiting for the next chapter of his bloody legacy to unfold. As the confrontation ended, Ambrose was left alone in the chilling silence, the echo of Oscar's laughter still hanging in the air. The mansion felt more hostile than ever, its every shadow a lurking threat. But despite the fear gnawing at him, Ambrose felt a glimmer of hope. The battle had just begun, and he was not yet defeated. He would fight the malignant force, challenge the cycle of violence, and strive to restore peace to the Mansion of Mirrors. In the wake of his chilling confrontation with Oscar's spirit, Ambrose retreated to the library. The air in the mansion was dense with a brewing storm, the building pressure nearly palpable. He was now more than ever a trespasser in Oscar's domain, but surrender was not an option. Hidden in the cryptic entries of Oscar's diary was his salvation, a ritual that Oscar performed after each violent act, a ceremony that allowed him to trap his victims' souls in the mirrors. Ambrose's heart pounded with a mixture of dread and hope. The ritual was his key, the way to reverse Oscar's macabre magic, to free the trapped souls, and to banish Oscar from the mansion. The ritual required certain objects, a mirror belonging to the victim before their death, a personal possession of the deceased, and an incantation spoken at the stroke of midnight. But finding these objects was no small task. The mansion was a labyrinth of rooms filled with countless artifacts. Days turned into weeks as Ambrose scoured the mansion, guided by the details from the diary. And the stories unfolded in the mirrors. His sleep was fleeting, and his meals often forgotten, but his resolve did not waver. His every discovery, a lost trinket, a forgotten mirror, was a victory against the mansion and its master. On a stormy night, when the wind rattled the mansion's old bones, and thunder echoed Oscar's laughter, Ambrose was ready. He had returned to the Hall of Mirrors, the objects of the ritual spread out before him. In the gloom, the mirrors watched him, their surfaces gleaming ominously. Time seemed to hold its breath as midnight approached, the seconds ticking away in the quiet of the mansion. As the old grandfather clock chimed midnight, Ambrose began the incantation. His voice wove through the hall, merging with the whistling wind and the pounding rain against the windows. The mirrors shimmered, their reflections twisting and writhing as if tormented. And then he felt it, a shift in the room, a lightness in the air. The oppressive dread that hung around the mansion seemed to dissipate. The howling wind calmed, and the mirrors stilled. The reflection staring back at him was not of Oscar or his victims, but his own, filled with weary determination. Ambrose knew then that he had taken the first step toward breaking the chain of terror. The road to redemption had just begun, the mirrors had lost some of their menace, and for the first time in weeks, Ambrose felt a glimmer of hope. The Mansion of Mirrors had found a worthy adversary. With each passing night, Ambrose repeated the ritual for every trapped soul. Each incantation echoed through the mansion, shaking its foundation, challenging its grim legacy. The once oppressive silence of the mansion was shattered, replaced by the resonating words of liberation. On the final night, with the last mirror before him, Ambrose steeled himself. The air was thick with anticipation, a hush falling over the mansion. This was the mirror that held Oscar's soul, the epicenter of the mansion's dread. As the grandfather clock chimed midnight, Ambrose spoke the incantation. His voice filled the hall, firm and resolute. The mansion shuddered, its walls groaning as if in pain. The mirror before him shimmered, the surface rippling like a disturbed pool of water. Then Oscar's spirit appeared, his face contorted with rage. He lunged at Ambrose, the mirror's surface rippling violently. But Ambrose held his ground, his voice unwavering as he completed the incantation. With a final bellow of anger, Oscar's image distorted and disappeared, the mirror's surface shattering into a million pieces. The sound reverberated through the mansion, a symphony of liberation. The shards of glass reflected not scenes of horror, but the relieved faces of the victims finally freed. With Oscar's banishment, the mansion sighed, its oppressive atmosphere lifting. The mirrors, stripped of their horrors, stood silent and empty. A sense of tranquility descended, the mansion finally freed from its bloody past. Exhausted but victorious, Ambrose left the Hall of Mirrors. The mansion around him, once a symbol of terror, now felt oddly comforting. As he stepped outside, the first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of hope. The mansion had found its peace, and so had Ambrose. He had come as a tenant but had become a liberator. His heart echoed with the silent gratitude of the freed souls, their curse finally broken. The Mansion of Mirrors stood as a testament to his courage, its halls no longer haunted by their gruesome past. It was a chilling reminder of his ordeal, but also a symbol of redemption. In the end, Ambrose had not become a reflection of the mansion's past. Instead, he was the mirror reflecting its change, a beacon of hope in the face of despair. The Mansion of Mirrors had found its redemption, and Ambrose, his purpose. As he walked away from the mansion, he knew he would never forget its mirrors and their silent stories. But he also knew he was leaving them behind, stepping away from the echoes of the past and into the promise of a new dawn. Thus, we conclude our terrifying journey within the Mansion of Mirrors, where liberation triumphed over legacy, and courage shattered the curse of a gruesome past. I trust this haunting tale has left you with a shiver down your spine, a testament to the eerie enigma that was once our world. Remember, dear listeners, in the realm of the macabre, every creak in the silence of the night, every flicker in the mirror's surface, may hold a story. Until our next foray into the shadowed corners of fear and the unknown, this is your host of Our Scary Stories, wishing you chilling dreams and a peaceful dawn. Good night, dear listeners. This is Our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.